The beauty of Bali needs no introduction. From its iconic, diverse landscape to its one-of-a-kind, authentic culture, Bali offers a magical experience to visitors, earning its nickname Land of the Gods. Among Bali's excellent qualities is inclusivity. Vulnerable groups such as women and youth has always been involved in various economic development activities, including the sustainable tourism sector. As a major tourist destination, Bali has suffered side effects of the pandemic, closing its doors for months in favor of safety. However, the government and residents alike continue efforts to flatten the curve of COVID-19 transmission. Almost all its residents have now been vaccinated, and a strict health protocol is implemented at all times. And the result shows. Bali is now ready to host the first event of Indonesia's G20 presidency. The first Finance and Central Bank Deputies meeting will be held on 9th to 10th December 2021. While meetings will be held in a strict health protocol for safety, we also aim to provide delegates with an experience full of Indonesian hospitality. Enjoy every moment of your visit. Relax, get mesmerized by the wonder of the island. Welcoming delegates of FCBD in December. See you in Bali.
Aku Afni, jurusan Hubungan Internasional.
Saya Flavas Rizkula, jurusan Ilmu Politik.
Saya Yoda, Fakultas Ilmu Pengetahuan Budaya.
Fernando, Teknik Elektro.
Fania dari Fakultas Hukum.
Natalia, Fakultas Hukum.
Amira, Sejarah.
Saya Kanur Ramdania dari Fakultas Ilmu Budaya.
Saya Anissa Wulansari, Ilmu Sejarah. Kerjasama multilateral antara negara-negara di dunia.
Menangani permasalahan dunia yang saat ini ya.
Tentang Indonesia di tahun 2022 bakal menjadi tuan rumah G20.
Tahun 1999 kalau nggak salah.
Wah, saya lupa.
Untuk membahas isu-isu global.
Kerjasama untuk meningkatkan kondisi di beberapa negara yang tergabung sih.
Penanganan pasca COVID dari segala macam sektor yang mengalami kemunduran gitu.
Enggak tahu.
Saya kira India loh. Terakhir saya baca berita, di urutan berikutnya India. Tapi nggak tahu kenapa berubah jadi Indonesia.
Di Bali ya kayaknya.
Di Bali.
Antara tahu gak tahu sih, cuma saya pernah baca gitu, misalnya ada kayak bank sentral dan menteri-menteri keuangan gitu, tapi untuk peran spesifiknya kurang tahu.
Kalau itu saya kurang tahu sih.
pengen G20 ini akhirnya bisa mencapai kesepakatan yang bisa di-apply baik negara maju dengan negara berkembang.
Mungkin diperhatikan juga ke industri-industri terkait seperti yang menghasilkan listrik dan lain-lain. Dan mungkin juga masuk iklim investasi kayak sekarang Indonesia mau masuk ke era electric vehicle, itu kan juga cukup bagus ya. Kayak mengurangi nanti mungkin impor BBM. Jadi kita bisa surplus neraca ekspor impornya.
Harapan aku sih ke depannya untuk ketimpangan ekonomi yang selama ini ada di dunia itu bisa cepat terselesaikan lah. Istilahnya negara-negara berkembang ya, apalagi sekarang kena dampak pandemi COVID-19 ini, nggak cuma Indonesia aja itu bisa terbantu dengan adanya G20 ini.
Semoga sih Indonesia bukan cuma jadi negara pengekspor bahan-bahan mentah. Jadi kayak kita juga bisa punya industri langsung di sini, punya kita sendiri juga.
Kayak ekonomi hijau ini bisa menjadi pedoman untuk melakukan perekonomian, untuk pembangunan ekonomi dan lain-lain gitu.
Kondisi dunia bisa lebih baik lah ya Mbak ya. Kan Indonesia jadi tuan rumah, mungkin kan akan banyak juga negara-negara yang berkunjung gitu. Jadi akan mengetahui lebih dalam mengenai Indonesia itu sendiri, meningkatkan pariwisata.
The beauty of Bali needs no introduction. From its iconic, diverse landscape to its one-of-a-kind, authentic culture, Bali offers a magical experience to visitors, earning its nickname Land of the Gods. Among Bali's excellent qualities is inclusivity. Vulnerable groups such as women and youth has always been involved in various economic development activities, including the sustainable tourism sector. As a major tourist destination, Bali has suffered side effects of the pandemic, closing its doors for months in favor of safety. However, the government and residents alike continue efforts to flatten the curve of COVID-19 transmission. Almost all its residents have now been vaccinated, and a strict health protocol is implemented at all times. And the result shows. Bali is now ready to host the first event of Indonesia's G20 presidency. The first Finance and Central Bank Deputies meeting will be held on 9th to 10th December 2021. While meetings will be held in a strict health protocol for safety, we also aim to provide delegates with an experience full of Indonesian hospitality. Enjoy every moment of your visit. Relax, get mesmerized by the wonder of the island. welcoming delegates of FCBD in December. See you in Bali.
Aku Afni, jurusan Hubungan Internasional.
Saya Flavia Sekolah, jurusan Ilmu Politik.
Saya Yoda, Fakultas Ilmu Pengetahuan Budaya.
Fernando, Teknik Elektro.
Tania dari Fakultas Hukum.
Natalia, Fakultas Hukum.
Amira, Sejarah.
Saya Kanuram Dania dari Fakultas Ilmu Budaya. Saya Anissa Wulansari, Ilmu Sejarah.
Kerjasama multilateral antara negara-negara di dunia.
Menangani permasalahan dunia yang saat ini ya.
Tentang Indonesia di tahun 2022 bakal menjadi tuan rumah G20.
Tahun 1999 kalau nggak salah.
Wah, saya lupa.
Untuk membahas isu-isu global.
Kerjasama untuk meningkatkan kondisi di beberapa negara yang tergabung sih.
Penanganan pasca COVID dari segala macam sektor yang mengalami kemunduran gitu.
Nggak tahu.
Saya kira India loh. Terakhir saya baca berita, di urutan berikutnya India. Tapi nggak tahu kenapa berubah jadi Indonesia.
Di Bali ya kayaknya.
Di Bali.
Antara tahu gak tahu sih, cuma saya pernah baca gitu, misalnya ada kayak bank sentral dan menteri-menteri keuangan gitu, tapi untuk peran spesifiknya kurang tahu.
Kalau itu saya kurang tahu sih.
Pengen G20 ini akhirnya bisa mencapai kesepakatan yang bisa di-apply baik negara maju dengan negara berkembang.
Mungkin diperhatikan juga ke industri-industri terkait seperti yang menghasilkan listrik dan lain-lain. Dan mungkin juga masuk iklim investasi kayak sekarang Indonesia mau masuk ke era electric vehicle. Nah, itu kan juga cukup bagus ya. Tuh, kayak mengurangi nanti mungkin impor BBM. Jadi kita bisa surplus neraca ekspor impornya.
Harapan aku sih ke depannya untuk ketimpangan ekonomi yang selama ini ada di dunia itu bisa cepat terselesaikan lah. Istilahnya negara-negara berkembang ya, apalagi sekarang kena dampak pandemi COVID-19 ini, nggak cuma Indonesia aja itu bisa terbantu dengan adanya G20 ini.
Semoga sih Indonesia bukan cuma jadi negara pengekspor bahan-bahan mentah. Jadi kayak kita juga bisa punya industri langsung di sini, punya kita sendiri juga.
Kayak ekonomi hijau ini bisa menjadi pedoman untuk melakukan perekonomian, untuk pembangunan ekonomi dan lain-lain gitu.
Kondisi dunia bisa lebih baik lah ya Mbak ya. Kan Indonesia jadi tuan rumah, mungkin kan akan banyak juga negara-negara yang berkunjung gitu. Jadi akan mengetahui lebih dalam mengenai Indonesia itu sendiri, meningkatkan pariwisata.
The beauty of Bali needs no introduction. From its iconic, diverse landscape to its one-of-a-kind, authentic culture, Bali offers a magical experience to visitors, earning its nickname Land of the Gods.
Seminar. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Indonesia G20 Presidency Seminar. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Indonesia G20 Presidency Seminar. Om Swastiastu. I would like to greet all finance and central bank deputies, honorable speakers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon to all of you attending the meeting in this venue and virtually. My name is Nadira Titalia, and it is my honor, on behalf of Indonesia G20 Finance Track Committee, to welcome all of you to the Indonesia G20 Presidency Seminar here in Bali Nusa Dua Convention Center. The main theme under Indonesia G20 Presidency is Recover Together, Recover Stronger. Under this theme, Indonesia G20 Presidency is committed to ensure G20 remain at the forefront of promoting productivity, increasing resilience and stability, ensuring sustainable and inclusive growth while supporting environment and multilateral partnerships. In this context, Indonesia aims to steer G20 collective efforts to emerge from the pandemic to shape the recovery momentum, ensuring that no one is left behind. This seminar will give us insights from policymakers and international organizations on the policy discussion of promoting even and stronger global economic recovery. We have 3 exciting sessions ahead of us today. The first session will talk about Recover Together, Recover Stronger. Then the second session, we will talk about policy settings for smooth exit strategy. And in the last session, we will discuss addressing scarring effect to secure future growth. Now we will begin our first panel session that will be directly hosted by Governor of Bank Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Peri Warjio. But before we begin, let us take a glimpse of the theme of today's event on this short video. This is Indonesia's G20 presidency.
2 years ago, life, as we knew it, was shattered. For the past 2 years, we readjust our definition of normal. We've experienced the worst moments in modern civilization. We've witnessed the best of people and humanity. And all that we've gone through together. COVID-19 has taken more than 5 million lives worldwide. Global growth was declining sharply during the pandemic, worse than any previous crisis. Millions lost their jobs and closed their businesses. Everyone was impacted. Nevertheless, strict health protocols along with the new COVID-19 vaccines has renewed our hope. Now, more than 7 billion people around the globe are already vaccinated, including children. While not remotely enough, this number is a start. Slowly but surely, the world economy is recovering. Countries open their borders, businesses are revived, and kids are elated to go back to school. The G20 has played major roles in the recovery, bringing forth initiatives such as the Debt Service Suspension Initiative, liquidity injection of more than $5 trillion to fight the destructive effects of the pandemic, reducing and erasing tax and tariff on vaccines, hand sanitizers, medical equipment, and drugs, investment reforms, and the launch of Joint Finance Health Task Force to respond to future pandemics. Despite these progress, the world recovery remains uneven, with countries emerging from the crisis facing different challenges. Recover together, recover stronger is the theme of the current G20 presidency held by Indonesia. Indonesia's presidency is committed to ensure that coming back from the pandemic crisis, nobody gets left behind. In the finance track, 6 main agendas are set and will be strongly promoted during Indonesia's presidency. Exit strategy to support recovery, addressing scarring effect to secure future growth, payment system in the digital era, sustainable finance, digital financial inclusion, and international taxation. And all of that starts here. On the first Finance and Central Bank Deputies meeting, we need to work hand in hand, shaping a post-pandemic recovery that benefits all. And what better way to start than to welcome you back to Bali. It is both our dues and objective to make sure that Bali and other places in the world like Bali return to its pre-pandemic glory, that people are given the opportunity to live a decent life, to turn the world economy back to its upward track, and to do it all together. Recover together, recover stronger.
Please welcome Governor of Bank Indonesia, His Excellency Mr. Peri Warjio.
Honorable Finance Minister, Central Bank Governors, deputies, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all very good luck, good evening, and good night. Welcome to the high-level seminar of Indonesia G20 presidency, which part of the theme of 2022 G20 finance track. But of course, with the humble and hospitality of Indonesia, welcome to Bali, the land of hope, optimism, and harmony. We have been fighting this COVID pandemic for 2 years. So many sad stories from the pandemic. But we have also achieved some promising progress through multilateralism, through G20. Overall, the COVID pandemic sends a 3 key message. First, we need to ensure the health of the people. Second, we need to get together to recover. And the third, how to address the climate change to save the planet. This year, under Italian presidency, a number of solid groundwork has been achieved. But there are so many that we need to advance together. How to recover together? This is the commitment of Indonesia. Under Indonesia G20 presidency, how we can recover together and recover stronger. His Excellency President of Republic Indonesia, President Joko Widodo, already gave the 3 clear directions. How we need to advance this progress to recover together and to recover stronger. First, we need to ensure the health of the people and addressing the pandemic. And second, how the transition period to address the climate change. And the third, how we can harness the benefit of digitalization for productivity. This is the theme of Indonesia G20 presidency 2022. To recover together and to recover stronger. And this is what we will be discussing in this high-level seminar. And we are so blessed. This high-level seminar, we have 3 distinguished panelists. The first, the Finance Minister of Italy, Minister Daniele Franco. And the second, the Finance Minister of India, Miss Nirmala Sitharaman. And finally, the Finance Minister of Republik Indonesia, Minister Sri Mulyani Indrawati. Are you okay, bro?
I'm fine.
Okay, let's get on it. Let's discuss the troika of G20. How the continuity of multilateralism and G20 evolving to address the many problems of the COVID, the health, the recovery, as well as to address the climate change. But before we progressing, as moderator, I will be mean. So each panelist will allocate it about 10 minutes. And then we will follow by question and answer. I will start, and we will start by inviting Finance Minister of Italy, Mr. Daniele Franco. Please, Mr. Daniele Franco. The floor, the screen is yours.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It is an honor to be here with you today, even if just virtually. I take the opportunity to thank Minister Sri Mulyani Indravati and Governor Perry Barrio for inviting me to speak at this inaugural event of the Indonesian G20 presidency. I would like to congratulate you on assuming the presidency this year and wish you great success. The theme of the Indonesian presidency, Recover Together, Recover Stronger, captures the urgency of today. We must find a shared and inclusive solution to global challenges and put our economies on the path of a sound and sustainable recovery. Recovering together is a powerful lens to frame the discussion on exit strategies. Many aspects of our fight against the pandemic have changed for the better, compared to where we were a year ago. Unprecedented effort to develop safe vaccines against COVID-19 have given us concrete hope that a recovery from the pandemic is possible. The extraordinary monetary and fiscal support in place since the onset of the health crisis has been pivotal in keeping the economic and social fabric of our societies together and in setting the recovery underway. However, recent downgrades in economic projections and health developments point to downward side risks that threaten the recovery underway. First and foremost is the spread of the new variants of COVID-19 with the associated upturn in contagion numbers, which can weaken the momentum for the recovery, increasing uncertainty and prolonging disruption in supply chains. We've already experienced an increase of uncertainty at the end of summer with the Delta variant. The new Omicron variant is again increasing uncertainty. In particular, travel restrictions may weigh against on cross-border services and tourism activities. As the outlook for the service sector and tourist-dependent sectors remains subdued, we appreciate the focus that the Indonesian G20 presidency intends to dedicate to these areas. It is imperative to ensure wider coverage of vaccines and greater resilience of our health systems. More generally, unequal distribution of vaccines and constrained policy space are two significant factors causing divergent recovery processes between advanced economies and emerging and developing countries. It is important that the G20, which is a prime forum for multilateral coordination and cooperation, provides the global leadership needed at this very delicate juncture. First, the G20 should renew its efforts to ensure safe, equitable, and affordable access to vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics everywhere. At the same time, economic policy should envisage enough flexibility to provide targeted and calibrated economic support with those, when those are necessary. As the outlook gradually improves, support to the economy is evolving into more targeted action in many countries. It is now fundamental that we begin the discussion of the most effective design, timing, and communication of exit strategies but we should avoid withdrawing all supportive measures as long as uncertainty about the evolution of the pandemic remains high. Recover stronger. As we look beyond support measures, addressing persistent challenges is essential for our economies to recover stronger. I will focus on 4 issues that are particularly important: climate change, global health preparedness, support to vulnerable countries, and digital inclusion. On all these, this year we made important progress, and I'm happy to see that Indonesia embraces them as part of the priorities of the new presidency. First, the fight against climate change, which in 2021 has gained an extraordinary momentum. Much remains to be done. The G20 can play an important role in closing the financial gap of climate transition and in identifying how policy measures and public investments can act as catalyzers of private sustainable investments. In particular, we need to ensure smooth implementation of the G20 Sustainable Finance Roadmap. This is not an easy task. We need to adopt a practical approach to support just and orderly climate transition that are also feasible and cost-effective in all countries. This approach could include the development of common frameworks and taxonomies for transition finance, efforts to improve the accessibility and affordability of traditional and innovative sustainable finance instruments, a discussion on the most effective policy levers that can orient sustainable investment decisions, including tax policy and carbon pricing. Second, global health preparedness. While the focus will continue to be on the response to the pandemics, it is our job to make sure that the lessons are learned once for all. The Health Finance Task Force established at the last joint ministerial meeting in October is an important step to enhance global cooperation on issues relating to pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. The task force will promote the exchange of experiences and best practices, advancing coordination arrangements between finance and health ministries, enhancing collective action, and encouraging effective management and allocation of resources to address the existing financial gaps in pandemic preparedness and response. Italy, as co-chair with Indonesia of the task force, is fully committed to give this contribution to the work to enhance the finance and health minister coordination, as well as timeliness and effectiveness of policy responses. Third, the support of vulnerable countries. The G20 has done much to respond to the needs of emerging and developing economies, from the debt moratorium, the debt service suspension initiative, to its support for the largest allocation of special drawing rights in the history of the International Monetary Fund, was around 650 billion US dollars. This new SDR allocation has made substantial resources available for vulnerable countries. Nevertheless, several low and middle-income countries remain in a difficult position. It will be crucial for the G20 to keep the focus on vulnerable countries. We should continue work to rechannel part of those SDRs to those countries in need, in line with the 100 billion US dollar global ambition announced by our leaders in the Rome Declaration. On that issue, we need to ensure the effective and timely implementation of the common framework. Continued and concerted effort will be necessary to step up the process. In the same vein, we need to drive the work on multilateral development banks forward in order to increase their impact, at a time in which countries have huge financing needs. This means continued progress on balance sheet optimization, as well as a timely completion of the independent review of NDB's capital adequacy framework. Fourth, digital inclusion. The disruptive effects of digitalization in terms of job losses, skills obsolescence, and automation in the production and distribution systems can have a disproportionate impact on the most vulnerable segment of societies. Digital inclusion is a key factor to realize the productivity enhancing potential of the digital transition. The G20 menu of policy options on digitalization and productivity has highlighted how strengthening access to digital infrastructures and granting adequate access to training in digital skills can help mitigate the negative impact of digitalization. We are delighted to see that the Indonesian G20 presidency will build on this work. Let me conclude with a general remark. The pandemic has shown that it is at times of crisis that multilateralism shows its greatest value. We must make sure that the G20 supports our shared ambition to recover together and recover stronger. Thank you.
Thank you indeed, Minister Franco. You already touching on many important issues on how we can advance on the recover together, recover stronger. I will invite Minister Sri Mulyani. How Indonesia will take this event on the advancement on the program under 2022 Indonesia presidency. Minister Sri Mulyani, please.
Thank you, Pak Ferry. I would like to first say hi to Daniela. You are on the other part of the world, and Minister Nirmala. Thank you very much for participating in this panel. And also our colleague, I would like to welcome you all in Bali, especially coming from abroad. So welcome to Indonesia, welcome to Bali. You are safe here. This is the land of God, so don't worry. First of all, I would like to say that as a host as well as G20 presidency, we are really very happy and glad to be able to host this first meeting, which is starting the G20 presidency, especially on a finance track. I would like to extend first my thanks to Governor Perry as well as all our colleagues from Bank Indonesia. We both working very closely together to host this event. I do hope that you enjoy and see this is really a place for all of us to discuss a very important issue that will affect the world. The G20 is a very important forum for all of us. We know that this is affecting majority of the global economy, trade, as well as investment. So for all of us to be here, starting to discuss about what is the challenge of the global economy is going to be very, very critical. As Minister Daniela mentioned earlier, that we are facing a still very challenging situation. First, of course, we are still in the pandemic situation. That's why you are all here in this room still wearing a mask and have to sit in a distance, because we are still in a pandemic. And this is continue to be another factor that will affect the recovery of the whole global economy. The second one, we also see that we are now facing a much more complex policy environment at the macro side. First, of course, we know that the fiscal space is already narrow. Monetary side is also challenging in some part of the world, in which the recovery accompanied by higher inflation rate, that then creating an asynchronous situation for all of us. Some countries have to start tightening their policy, others still need to support and loosening their policy instrument. This complexity is going to be one of the most important discussions that we are going to discuss in this first part of this G20. How we are going to be able to synchronize, even if we are not in a synchronized situation. Synchronize exit policy, which is difficult, which is also challenging. But I'm sure in the G20 forum, we will be able to discuss and come up with not only communicate, the most important is policy action that can establish confidence for the global world to see that this group of countries that is affecting 80% of global GDP can discuss and can agree on the direction of policy recovery. That's why Indonesia's theme of recover together and recover stronger is very critical. And we are here, we'd like to provide an environment for all of us to be able to discuss in a much more coherent, open, transparent, so that the best outcome can be achieved. We also see that the COVID is still creating uncertainty on our recovery. As the vaccination is already rolled out, the total number of vaccine produced in the world actually can vaccinate 80% of the population in this world. But unfortunately, it is not evenly distributed. We all understand many advanced countries has already achieved more than 80% of their population vaccinated. But some part of the world, many of developing countries, is still severely lag behind. And this is not because this is supposed to be morally not right, but also it creates a real concrete risk for the recovery itself. Because the nature of pandemic is actually creating this kind of risk. We are going to be as strong as the weakest part within this global environment. So having a vaccine access, especially for the less developed countries, is going to be very critical. We've already established G20 Joint Finance Health Task Force, as mentioned by Minister Daniela, and we do hope that we are going to be able to discuss how the world can be better prepared on a pandemic preparedness, how we are going to cooperate more so that we can prevent earlier. The damage should not be that significant or huge for not only for the human being but also for the economy. We need to discuss about the resources. We need to discuss about mechanism to cooperate. The third one, which Minister Daniel has already mentioned, is about climate change. But we also, Indonesia, our leaders, President Jokowi has already mentioned in Glasgow, as well as in many forum international, our commitment. This is also another global challenge. Sustainable finance is going to be very critical. It is not only about the responsibility for each nation to determine, contribute reduction of CO2, but how we are going to be able to get the financing as well as the technology. I do hope within the Sustainable Task Force, we are going to be, or working group, we are going to be able to discuss more concrete how we are going to finance a lot of very good initiatives, energy transition mechanism, and many of what we call it discussion on commitment on a forestry and others. Indonesia presidency will put 6 important priority agenda, which is related to the exit policy to support recovery, addressing scarring effect in order to secure future growth, payment system in the digital era, sustainable finance, financial inclusion, digital and small medium enterprises, and international taxation. All these priorities link very well with what we want to establish a recovery together and recover stronger. Digital technology is definitely very critical, and that's why Pak Peri is going to then lead in this area, including on the financial inclusion. We want to have a tangible and substantive outcome from this G20 meeting. Series 1 years in which we are going to repeatedly meeting. First, we want to have the task force of joint health and finance to be able to come up with a roadmap of pandemic prevention, preparedness, and responses. We want to have also a certain indicative of commitment on the funding, because without that, it's going to be non-credible on that kind of commitment. On climate change, we want to have a roadmap on sustainable finance. We hope it can create a strong reference point on the building block to leverage international financing and unlock private sector investment. We also want to support low carbon economy transition. On the international taxation, which we already achieved quite substantial progress, we want to have a guiding principle on the international tax system to achieve fair, simple, equitable taxation for both developed and developing countries. And to revitalize infrastructure, we want to have a much more inclusive and mobilizing financing from private sector. I think we are all have a strong momentum to work together because we see the risk and the threat to the global economy is very real. So the Indonesia theme, recover together, recover stronger. I do hope it is not going to be just a jargon, but really motivate all of us, all of you. We are all here to be able to cooperate together. And I'm very optimistic, and I do hope that you are all is going to also have the same spirit. Be very optimistic about what we could do and we should do. And at the same time, be very humble so that we can listen and learn from each other. Thank you so much, Pak Peri, and I would like to welcome you all again to Indonesia. And I do hope that this is going to be a starting successful Indonesia presidency in the G20 2022. Thank you so much.
Thank you indeed, Minister Sri Mulyani. Indeed, together we can. Together we can recover stronger and recover together. Next, I will invite the 2023 G20 President. This is the Troika, Italy, Indonesia, India. I will invite Finance Minister of India, Ms. Nirmala Sita Raman, please. Minister Nirmala, please. The screen is yours.
Thank you very much. Minister Sri Mulyani, Minister Daniele Franco, Governor Peri Rajiv, distinguished friends and colleagues. I congratulate and extend my best wishes to Minister Sri Mulyani and the Government of Indonesia for their G20 presidency. Under the Italian presidency, the G20 rose to the occasion and effectively responded to the challenges of 2021. I congratulate and thank the Italian presidency for a very successful G20 presidency. Their efforts at catalyzing G20 policy coordination have all resulted in several timely and useful outcomes and initiatives. The present times call for skilled stewardship of global economic recovery. The focus now is not only on recovery, but also on the nature of recovery that we should aspire for. For a strong, sustainable, balanced, and inclusive recovery, it is imperative to ensure collective progress. At this juncture, there can be no better theme than recover together, recover stronger. The G20 has consistently been advocating for affordable and equitable access to vaccines, therapeutics, and so on. The unequal and inequitable production and distribution of vaccines is a key factor underlining the divergences in recovery. The threat is even more accentuated by the emergence of new variants such as Omicron and the possibility of more waves of infection. Just a few weeks ago in Rome, we heard resounding calls upon the G20 to translate global solidarity into global action. We were warned at our joint meeting with health ministers that an additional 5 million people would die from the virus if vaccines were not distributed. There are regions in the world today where hardly 5 to 6% of the population has been vaccinated, and in some 40 countries, less than 10% of the population is fully vaccinated. Until each and every citizen is vaccinated, the threat of resurgence of the pandemic remains very much alive. Therefore, it is our primary responsibility to ensure that vaccines are available, affordable, and accessible to all. In India, we have administered over 1.25 billion doses of vaccines so far. We are running an intensive knock at every door, Har Ghar Dastak campaign to ensure that no one gets left behind. Through bilateral and multilateral collaborations, India has so far supplied more than 72 million vaccine doses to over 90 countries, including by way of grant. This is a reflection of our strong commitment to coordinated global action. The pandemic has hit hard the poor and the vulnerable, especially in emerging and developing economies. The presidency has rightly identified addressing the scarring effects as a priority area for secure and stronger recovery. Our strategy should focus on providing much needed immediate relief, as also improving the medium and long term outlook of the vulnerable groups and sectors. It will require appropriate policy interventions, reallocation of resources, skill development, and capacity building. Global recovery remains very fragile. Recovery initiatives are constrained by narrow policy space and inflationary threats, as also the concern about policy rate tightening in systemically important countries. Indonesia's priority of focusing on exit strategies and comes at the right time. Timely and effective communication about exit strategies is more important now than ever before. I hope that our discussions today and further will work of all the work that the G20 will provide useful guidance for tackling this challenge. In India, the government is providing necessary support, especially through capital expenditure and reforms in various sectors like infrastructure and manufacturing, apart from trying to bring about the necessary institutional changes to boost productivity, ease supply constraints, and to improve the business environment as a whole. Targeted investments, especially in social and physical infrastructure, can accelerate the global response to COVID-19 and enhance the resilience of economies to deal with the future pandemics. One important lesson that the pandemic has taught us all is that a single weak link, which Sri Mulyani referred to in her speech, a single weak link in the chain can break the entire chain. We can no longer afford to have policies that widen inequality, both within and across economies. We must prepare for an inclusive and transformative recovery that puts people's well-being at the center. Inclusiveness should become the bottom line for all our policies, be it digital, health, education, or structural reforms. Promoting productivity and improving human capital will aid our efforts to minimize the scarring effects of the pandemic. The pandemic has induced significant reallocation of labor and capital in some sectors. Technology adoption, particularly of digital technologies, has now permeated several areas: education, health, entertainment, retail, trade, and offices. New opportunities are arising from these structural shifts, and we must equip our people to make the best use of them all. In the design of recovery measures, a balance needs to be struck between the long-term prospects of the economy and addressing the immediate challenges in terms of providing support to the most affected and also ensuring delivery of quality health services. Infrastructure investments will remain key to our efforts and enabling a quick and stable return to the growth path. Our goal should be to maximize the synergies that sustainable and quality infrastructure can provide. Green investments will play a key role in the rebuilding efforts of our governments. The G20 needs to deliberate how climate finance and green technologies can be made available to developing economies to incentivize to green growth. Let me conclude by emphasizing that the only path to sustainable and strong global recovery is by learning from each other's experiences and by supporting each other. While we need to enable our respective economies to get back to the growth path, we also need to be mindful of how our policy decisions are impacting the global economy. Multilateralism remains the only route for a strong and collective global recovery. While we rightly focus on efforts for long-lasting and inclusive recovery, we must ensure that the world is not caught off guard in future by pandemics and other disasters. We should maintain the momentum of our work on pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response, and finalize the concrete steps we were considering in this direction. The work of the G20 finance track for 2022 is all set in the right direction. The historically rich and naturally pristine Bali provides a perfect setting for the start of G20's new year. I look forward to the Indonesian presidency continuing to lead the way in enhancing international cooperation as we collectively rebuild a resilient and sustainable global economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Minister Nirmala. You touched a number of important issues for especially to recover stronger on the need of sustainable, strong, balanced, and inclusive growth. I will come to you later on. Ladies and gentlemen, we already discussed a number of important issues how we need to advance through multilateralism, through G20, a number of issues how to be able together recover, to recover stronger. Of course, the immediate issue is how to ensure the health, the vaccination. But beyond that also, how to synchronize the normalization of policy, scarring effect. For recover stronger, we need to address the fundamental structural issues, productivity, digitalization, as well as also inclusion, not least the climate. Why don't we dig into detail some of these issues? Let me start with Minister Franco first. Minister Franco, our leaders have agreed to develop G20 Finance and Health Task Force on the pandemic preparedness to address some of the remaining issues. In your views, how we need to advance on this aspect, especially for better preparedness to address of pandemic, and how to advance this discussion. Second, on the structural issue, you touch a lot of aspects on the climate, but also under Italian presidency already deliver a very excellent menu of policy option on the digital transformation and productivity recovery. What is your views how we need to advance on this discussion on the digitalization to support the productivity of our economy, global economy, to recover stronger? Two questions, Minister Franco, please.
So thank you very much, Governor Perry. Indeed, you touched two very relevant issues for our presidency, but also, I believe, for your presidency, and after that, for the Indian presidency. We are very happy about with agreement to establish the joint finance and health task force. as we need to be prepared for future pandemic and rethink how we could internationally cooperate to prevent and respond to such threats. I believe that task force represents a significant achievement for the G20. Importantly, it will further strengthen the crucial coordination between finance and health ministries, while enhancing global cooperation on issues related to prevention, preparedness, and response. It is also our chance to address global health issues, not as aid for nations, but as strategic investments in global public goods from which every nation will benefit. I hope that this enhanced dialogue will help us supporting our effort to tackle the current pandemic. The emergence of the Omicron variant demonstrates how the G20 needs to keep playing a crucial role, a crucial leadership and coordination role in this. We cannot afford to disregard the lessons from the COVID-19. In this regard, the task force could also play an important role in promoting the exchange of experiences, providing G20 members and relevant international organizations with an appropriate forum to discuss their response to the pandemic. This could possibly lead to the definition of a G20 best practices playbook on prevention, preparedness, and response. The task force has two very ambitious goals. One is exploring modalities to establish a financial facility to fill pandemic gaps, preparedness gaps by early 2022. The other one is developing more structured coordination arrangement between finance and health ministries. I was very pleased by the constructive discussion at the joint ministerial meeting in October, and I hope this will set the tone for a very productive collaboration going forward. I think it is important for everyone to take part in the task force works with spirit of collaboration and proactive attitude in order to bridge differences pragmatically and achieve consensus on the way forward. I'm confident that by working together, we can guarantee the success of the task force. As to productivity, indeed, the discussion on productivity growth and digitalization was one of our main priorities. The framework working group indeed dedicated a lot of effort to identifying the best policy measure to realize the productivity enhancing potential of the digital transition, while at the same time ensuring inclusivity. There is, of course, ample room for continuing this work, and I see two important aspects to further explore. First, the inclusivity angle deserves further attention. The pandemic impressed a tremendous push to the reorganization of supply chains and to new work practices, intensively leveraging on digital technology. It has accelerated a process that was already in place. Some of these changes will likely be irreversible. Some questions must now be addressed. I'm thinking, for instance, at the different capabilities to manage the process of digital adoption across jobs that might create a new device and exacerbate pre-existing ones. In this regard, we should identify active labor market policies for improving the upskilling and requalification of the workers, as well as the setup of lifelong learning schemes. This design would greatly benefit from multilateral discussion and the sharing of national experiences. Second, we should not overlook underlying trends in productivity. At the moment, productivity is expected to rebound strongly across the 20 countries. But we are talking about a rebound, not about a structural development. In fact, the COVID-19 outbreak occurred after a prolonged slowdown in productivity growth in many countries. Without entering now into the debate on the productivity puzzle, there is a crucial aspect that we should closely monitor, technology diffusion. The simple fact that high productivity superstar firms coexist with many low productive enterprises signal that something got stuck in the transmission mechanism of technology. This prevented the benefit of innovations to be widespread. If we want to make the recent acceleration in the adoption of digital technologies related to COVID restriction an engine of higher productivity and growth, we must be mindful of all the structural factors that must be addressed to make sure that this process is not hindered by the same weaknesses that have hampered productivity over the last decade. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Franco, for the excellent explanation of the two aspects of the addressing the health and the pandemic preparedness, as well as how the productivity can advance, including also on the digitalization. Let me turn to Minister Sri Mulyani. You talked about the need to advance of the vaccination. So, the fact of the problem is, of course, the distribution of the vaccine. So speed. It's not yet evenly distributed, especially among the emerging market and developing countries. It is still grabbing how to get the vaccine and to ensure the health of the people. That's one. The second, you talk about how the multilateralism coordination on the normalization process, both on the fiscal, especially on the monetary policy. These two aspects is very important, how we can advance to recover together. Please, Minister Sri Mulyani.
Vaccination is very, very critical. As I mentioned earlier that today, actually the production of vaccine globally can vaccinate 80% of global population, but it is not achieved as just divided the number of vaccine produced per population in the world. What we are facing is the distribution, as you mentioned earlier. Now, many of the countries have the problem on distribution. First, in the first stage of the COVID or pandemic, many have a problem on the financing. That's why multilateral institutions like World Bank, ADB, or even AIIB, they are all out helping country, especially developing country, through program financing related to the vaccination and vaccine access. I think that's good. Question, are they going to be adequate in this case? In Riyadh declaration before, we announced around $5 trillion, which is supposed to be the need for the world to be able to create an adequate production of vaccine as well as also distribution of the vaccine. So now the question is, if the financing is there, are they relatively creating evenly distributed of the access of finance for vaccination? Within this vaccine program globally, we also, during the Roma meeting, many of the global leaders, especially on advanced countries, they announced that they are going to provide grant for free vaccine for many developing countries. Now, the problem then shifts into that many developing countries is not yet ready to receive the vaccine and to do the vaccination. This has something to do with their health system. Don't forget that this vaccine has a different characteristic. Some may be less demanding, like the cool box is only -7°C. Other require a -70°, which is, I think, is going to be very demanding or expensive for a country to be able to provide those kind of infrastructure. The second one is the health worker who will vaccinate. Like in Indonesia, for example, Pak Peri also knows very well that we have to mobilize even our military and police in order for us to be able to roll out vaccination, especially across the Indonesia, which is archipelago country, and also a remote area. This is not a normal situation. That's why we will use all resources. Now, all country, or especially less developing country, also may not have this kind of ability in terms of the health system in order for them to do it, to be able to do the vaccination rollout. And that's why in this task force, joint health and finance, the two important aspects need to be addressed. Finance is for sure, but the health system need to be also addressed. We do hope that this very valuable, expensive, very costly pandemic consequences for the world will provide us a lesson learned, which all countries in the world willing to learn from it. That means that we need to continue improve health system across the world, and the ability to coordinate and communicate sharing data, including sharing the vaccine production, IPR, as well as the distribution. These are all is going to be very critical for all of us not to repeat this kind of pandemic devastated consequences. The second question regarding this, the cooperation on how we are going to be able to design a more synchronized exit policy in a much more challenging, because each country jurisdiction have their own different speed of recovery and also characteristic of the recovery. Like I mentioned earlier, developed country, they are now facing with high inflation because of the supply disruption, labor, as well as energy price. In many other countries, they are still lag behind. The output gap may be still there in many countries, but the instrument like the fiscal tools is already narrowly in terms of the space. So we really have to be able to communicate and coordinate across us, because advanced country policy definitely have a spillover effect for the rest of the world. That's why the communication, clear planning, as well as in this case cooperation need to be continued strengthened, and this is critical time. I think we learned from 2008-2009, in which at that time we are all doing counter cyclical, and then after that a country, big country, announcing tapering without clear communication and also preparation, creating a spillover to many the rest of the world. So we do learn from that. We do hope that during this meeting there will be more discussion regarding where each country states of recovery, what complexity that they are facing, and how we are going to be able to strengthen this cooperation. You mentioned, Governor Perry, about multilateralism.
Yes.
This one, again, not only in the COVID, climate change, but also on this policy coordination, the role of multilateral institution and multilateralism is very critical. And I think this has been voiced by all member countries. So I'm optimistic that we are all believe that multilateralism is very important, because this is going to be a platform for cooperation, collaboration. And we are witnessing when the world able to create a cooperation, we actually achieve much better result. As emerging country, developing country, witnessing in the past 2 decades reduction of the poverty, improvement of the prosperity. These are all because the world cooperate more integrated and also relying on the multilateralism and multilateralism in terms of the approach, and multilateral institution playing also important role. So I do hope that this is going to be continue the spirit that need to be strengthened during this Indonesia presidency. Thank you.
On the latest aspect, on the impact of normalization, there is some impact of the spillover. Any advice both to the multilateral institution as well as the emerging market to able to withstand to those aspects?
Well, first I appreciate that many of first now advanced country recognize that their decision or even communication have a spillover potential to the rest of the world. So I do understand that now many of the advanced country policy maker, they are very careful in crafting their statement. They are providing a clarity of the signaling and path of their policy. That's really something that need to be continued or even strengthened. Now, for many emerging countries, because we need to also strengthen our own fundamentals. Like in Indonesia, Pak Peri, when we have taper tantrum 2013, that was when we are suffering from this taper tantrum and much more severe because our current account deficit and balance of payment situation. Today, Indonesia have a surplus and a much stronger. Communication on the monetary and fiscal cooperation like us is creating a clarity how we are facing with this pandemic, what kind of deficit financing and what kind of cooperation from the monetary side in terms of financing and in a more temporary basis. That's create confidence in the market, bondholder, rating agency. I think many emerging countries can learn from that. That first, you really have to make sure that even during this pandemic, you can do reform. Indonesia is doing reform. We are doing a reform on a taxation. We are doing reform on a fiscal government transfer. So fiscal side, we are improving, making sure that we are going to be able to come up healthier after this pandemic. Monetary side, we are working closely and also communicating very clearly. And on the external balance of payment, we strengthening our deficit so that we have a much better resilience when advanced countries have to do their policy. So these are all also creating a much better ability to withstand. And also we also do the structural reform like job creation law in order for us to be able to attract capital in a more permanent basis, FDI rather than short-term capital. These are all maybe line of defense for many emerging countries. Multilateral agency like IMF, World Bank and other, I think they play a very important role during this kind of situation. Helping country, especially emerging, developing in order to address the structural issue. They also have financing power so that they can create a stopgap so that they are going to have the shock directly creating a damage to many developing and emerging economy which is still in a very early stage of recovery. So that is more or less maybe what we think and we should create this kind of cooperation.
Thank you, Minister Sri Mulyani. Indeed, multilateralism, policy coordination, and G20 is the well placed to do that. Let's move on to a number of issues on the recover stronger. The issue of the productivity, the issue of the structural reform, and one of them as well as also digitalization. Minister Nirmala, you mentioned a lot about the need to increase productivity, the need for structural reform in the infrastructure, in the labor, as well as how to transform of the real sector economy to attain the stronger, sustainable, inclusive, and balanced growth. So, can you give more advice? How can we, as working together, multilateralism under G20, to advance so many structural reform agenda? That's one. Second, you mentioned a lot about digitalization for inclusion of the economy and finance. And India is well placed to share those aspects of the use of digitalization to advance not only the financial inclusion but economic inclusion. Can you share those two? One on the structural reform to increase productivity through infrastructure, human capital, and other aspect of structural reform. And second, how we need to advance digitalization, especially for economic and financial inclusion. Minister Nirmala, please.
Thank you. These are very critical aspects of our recovery. Your one-liner that recover together, recover stronger, actually is a very critical message, and I would think it is the G20's serious concern, and G20's business it should be to work together for achieving that. And in that, the question that you raised, the first one, talking about productivity, talking about bringing in better skills and better labor, and also systemic reforms. I think that if all nations have to work towards removing the permanent scarring that the pandemic has done, and if you want to remove or mitigate the scarring and speed up the recovery process, that is a very critical component, and that is what you raised as a question. Even as you're trying to ensure that global financial arrangements are such that the challenges posed by the pandemic can be addressed. And Sri Mulyani went into a bit of detail, which was right, to say how, even if the global systems are willing to give, even as grant, vaccines, some countries are unfortunately not even in a position to be able to take it because of basic infrastructural and logistical issues. And also because in many countries, the framework for reaching to the last person in the system who's living probably in a remote area, who's living probably in an area which doesn't have so much of a access for other facilities, is also found wanting. And it's not their fault. What we need therefore to do is, even as we place emphasis on getting the vaccine to everybody, because look at the figures, it's very worrying. Nearly 75% of population have had at least one dose of vaccine to them, but only in those high income countries and middle income, upper middle income countries. Whereas those who are in low income category, there is only about 6.2% of people who have had the luck of having even at least one dose of the vaccination. Now, if this has got to be ramped up, the issue is just not, are we getting enough vaccine doses, and preferably are we getting it as grant, is one side of the story, but the other is how are we going to be able to speed it up in countries whose primary infrastructure, manpower requirements are absolutely rudimentary. We'll have to be able to do something to get over that and reach them speedily. So that is one. And second, countries today have seen the opportunity that the pandemic has provided them in a different sort of way. We've utilized this period effectively to bring in factor reforms. In India, we have taken up quite a few of these, and therefore, in a way, providentially, we are now being able to realign many of our factors. One example being the labor, particularly the informal labor, which marked a very significant component of India's economy. Because of the way simultaneously digitization was happening, which is your second question, but I'm using it also to explain the first question's answer. So when the digitization also spread, we are today able to ensure that the informal workers too are getting onto the formal platform. Many of these sustenance help that the government extended during the pandemic, particularly because of the lockdown. The nation entirely had a lockdown from March onwards in 2020. And at that time, to support the most unorganized level of labor, who were spread all across the country, quite a few resources were made to reach purely by using the direct benefit transfer mechanism, which was essentially a product of digitization and giving a biometric identity card for each one of them. So the factor reforms, adjusting and realigning the changing requirements of the economy post the pandemic, whether it is for the informal labor or for the industry, which now looks at opportunities that are arising, particularly for a country like India, where we have labor and semi-skilled, fully skilled, highly skilled, or even less skilled labor. We have given emphasis to manufacturing through productivity linked incentive schemes. The 13 champion sectors which were identified, and for whom for every incremental increase in production over a certain level are being given incentives, and that has been assured for the next certain number of years, 5 years in some cases, 4 years in some others, but with certainty and assurance. When government has come in to say we will do this, you find a lot of newer investments taking place, and therefore that has benefited the labor which is looking for newer opportunities, and there is a reset in the way labor is moving from one occupation to not a totally different but slightly different occupation using their skills. Now, that is the way in which I would largely say we have addressed the issue of keeping the reforms momentum up even during the pandemic and ensuring vaccination reaches the maximum. As I said, even in my opening remarks, we are today well over 1.25 billion vaccination doses, and as a result of which, there is a confidence with which Indian economy's revival is happening, and the government is keen to keep the pace of vaccination to go on and achieve saturation. In that, all eligible population will have to be given both the doses and therefore ensure that the economy is safe. I'll move to the second question that you talked about on the digital and digitization in a way has been a theme of our government since 2014. As a result, in some way or the other, even during the pandemic, both on health and education, even with all the disparities still in place, I'm not overlooking them, we were able to give telemedicine for many of those who couldn't even rush because there weren't enough hospital beds. So telemedicine was possible because we had digitized it to an extent. Similarly, children have been away from school for a long time. Many of them had online classes going on. And that was possible because we had optical fibers having reached very many lower third level administrative rung. Of course, I'm not saying every child was connected. There were still children who did not have a pad with which they could get online education. Those disparities will have to be addressed by us. The last point to explain how digitization has helped us in the recovery, particularly because of the way in which the pandemic had affected a collective psychology of going to the bazaar, buying things, or being seen around in the mall, or going together with a family for a large wedding. None of that could happen. But digital payments, even for the repatriated workers who are abroad, or those who are coming back to India, digital payments has really changed the way Indians deal with their commercial transactions. Small transactions of buying and selling some products or larger transactions have all now gone onto the digital platform. I'm proud to say India leads the world on digital platforms, and the India stack of things which have been created by our young technical, very fintech savvy people are really making us feel that even the smallest of person in India, the poorest or the remotest citizen, is today using not a smartphone, but even from a feature phone is able to be many of his activities. In conclusion about digitization, as I said, digitization helped us to somewhat cross the bridge even in education, even in health. Today, we are probably one of the countries which is giving a digital certification for the vaccination. You can take it any way you want, and it is not lost out. If the paper is lost, it's available online also. And the CoWIN platform that we created to identify people who need the vaccination or identify people who have had even one vaccine have all helped. And the last point on digitization, so that the recovery is going to be all inclusive, is we have focused inclusion, financial inclusion, my first eye, where every Indian was given a bank account using his identity, biometric identity card, and all information about his bank operations were available on his phone. So in a way, he didn't have to go to the physical bank. So inclusion is financial inclusion. We promoted a lot of investment so that people know that money is coming in different areas. They could, go and search for activity. In investment also increased opportunities for job. So second eye. The third eye, for the last few years, not anticipating any pandemic, but even otherwise, wanted to give a big opportunity for innovation so that people are not seeking jobs, but are able to provide jobs in a small way, 1+3 people, 1+5 people. Now that has created a lot of basic infrastructure digitized in which young people are seeing opportunities come for their products to be marketed or even to touch with people who need that kind of help. So my first eye was financial inclusion, second was investment, third is innovation, which government supported. We've given them quite a few fiscal concessions. And the fourth eye, if I may add, is institutional support. We made sure banks, we made sure governments, we made sure the policy through government are all aligned with this digitally supported economy stimulus. And therefore the 4I, all on the back of technology, is what has made difference today for India to recover the way we are recovering. And I hope to sustain it purely thanks to the people of India who are so resilient and adaptive. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Nirmala, please. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we already talked number of issues. How under G20 we need to advance the many progress to recover together and recover stronger. To recover together, the most important thing, how to ensure the health, how to ensure the supply and distribution of the vaccine, the health system. But this is the multilateral that need also to come forward because many emerging and developing countries are struggling to have the vaccination roll out. Second, the need for normalization of the policy, exit policy. Minister Simon talking about synchronized, well communicated, well calibrated, but also the ability of emerging market and developing countries to withstand the impact of it. This is also need multilateralism, G20. But addressing the scarring effect, Minister Nirmala mentioned about, this is also important for recovering together. There's a lot of issues that we need to advance, and of course, this issue will be discussed under Indonesia G20 presidency. On the recover stronger, there are a number of structural reform, productivity, the need of infrastructure, human capital, digitalization, but also energy transition. Also addressing the climate change as well as on the digitalization. I think those issues that we will discuss under Indonesia G20 presidency. Before we closing, let's invite Minister Franco, if you have 1, 2, or 3 sentences at most for closing remark, please. And then, Minister Nirmala, and last, of course, not least, Minister Sri Mulyani. 1, 2, or 3 sentences, Minister Franco, for closing, please.
Well, there is a lot that we could say, but first of all, let me stress one aspect, the aspect of continuity. I think G20 is playing a crucial role as a worldwide forum for, let's say, analysis and for policy making, first of all. And there was a lot of continuity between the Saudi and the Italian presidency. Take, for instance, the pandemic. Under the Saudi presidency, a lot was done to, let's say, to tackle the ongoing pandemic, COVID-19. We continued on that work, but we tried to look into the future and to work on the preparation for future pandemics.
Thank you.
And I believe that the Indonesian presidency via the task force will carry out a lot of work in that regard. So I would like to stress that we need to work together, and the different presidencies really should one follow the other, building on the work of the previous presidency.
Thank you.
And I'm certain that you will do that, you will be successful.
Thank
And
you.
I also am certain that the Indian presidency after yours will continue in that regard. And we will be very happy to keep working with you and to support you in whatever way you will consider important or needed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Three words: continuity, together, and always support. Minister Nirmala, please. Just 1, 2, 3 sentence closing remark, please.
Thank you very much. I quite agree with Daniele Franco on his emphasis on continuity, and I'm sure Indonesia will carry the mantle forward. But emphasis on multilateralism,
yes,
particularly the task force will, I would think, will have to finish its job quicker, and there should be a permanent framework for financing global any future, God forbid, any future pandemic. And also to make sure that globally the world is better prepared to face any such situation. And last point, of course, multilateralism and looking at funding and technology support for climate action.
Thank you, Minister Nirmala. Finally, Minister Sri Mulyani, closing remark, please.
Well, we will be together facing this challenging environment. I'm very delighted when Indonesia to take over this presidency. I received a lot of offers from all our colleagues, from the G20 members, multilateral institutions, that they want to support Indonesia presidency. So this is a good start. And I'm going to ask you to help us in this case. Second one, I think with this challenge, I'm very optimistic that we can work together in a much better and stronger collaboration, so that we are going to achieve a better result. This is a global responsibility. The third, of course, the spirit of multilateralism. I think it's going to be tested in this very particular situation. So I do hope that despite many of the good speeches, we want to see it in the deputy level, at the ministerial level, Sherpa level, and then the head of state level, that we are all really committed to this multilateralism spirit, because we are all together, and together we will make the world better. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Let's conclude on this high-level meeting, ladies and gentlemen. Please, big applause to Minister Franco, Minister Nirmala, as well as Minister Sri Mulyani. That's conclude this session, but don't go away. There will be second session on the normalization and the third session on the scarring effect. With that, thank you very much.